Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks here on TVP World. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guest on this next interview. Now, Polish mountaineer Waldemar Kowalewski was seriously injured while climbing broad peaks in Pakistan after being caught in an avalanche. With no helicopter access at that altitude, a rescue team is now helping him down the mountain on foot. It's a reminder of the dangers climbers face in extreme environments. Joining us today on TVP World to explain what happens and what's next is Oswald Rodrigo Pereira, mountaineer and filmmaker. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Hello.
So, what do you know so far about what happened to Mr. Kowalewski on Broad Peak?
So, as far as I know, Waldemar went up to Camp 2 on Broad Peak when the weather was not very good. It was snowing. So basically, 2 days of snow created high risk of avalanches. But despite most of the climbers deciding not to go up, not to take their chances on this bad weather, most of them, they went down. Waldemar and two of his fellow climbers, they continued the climb. And while they were descending, there was an avalanche triggered. Two of the climbers managed to get them outside of the avalanche site, but Waldemar got his leg broken. The problem is, as you mentioned, at this altitude, it was around 6,500 meters. It's really hard to manage any situations, any actions. So to walk down with a broken leg was very difficult. The problem was that there was bad weather, and in Pakistan it's a very tricky situation because if you want to fly with the helicopters for a rescue operation, the helicopters belong to the army. So usually they need really clean weather due to the conflict area between Pakistan and India. Like it's really close to the border with China. They need 2 helicopters flying. Also, the insurance procedure is quite long. So it's not that easy to send helicopters right away. And when they were ready to fly, the weather didn't allow them to fly. Next thing is, in Pakistan, there are no rescue services like we have in Poland, for instance. So high altitude porters could go up, but I think the best guys that were there and that are trained and prepared and acclimatized are Sherpas, which are Nepali climbers, and they decided 3 of them to go up. Probably they were paid by the outfitter of Waldemar, which is an agency, Lila Peak. And as far as I know, the manager of the agency, the owner, asked the Sherpas to go up. I guess they were acclimatized because they are very strong guys. I know one of them personally, and I know he climbed Manaslu also in winter. So they went in a couple of hours, reaching Waldemar in a super fast time, and they brought him down. So basically, I think he's all right now. He's waiting in base camp. Another thing is that they still need to evacuate him from this altitude of 5,000 meters to the hospital. So they need for clear weather to allow the helicopters to fly and bring him back.
Right, so it does sound like the difficulty is with a multifaceted, not just the altitude, but there's also a lot of logistical issues as well that's posing a lot of danger. Well, my question would be, what do you think is the motivation behind the will to taking such risk? Like you mentioned, the weather wasn't getting good, and most of the climbers decided to turn back. But we've repeatedly heard story about these climbers taking extreme risks to go up in the peak in a very challenging weather. And you're a mountaineer yourself, and I'm wondering if we can dig a little bit into kind of what mindset kind of kicked off at that point.
Well, I think being there brings you a lot of joy. It satisfies your ambition, ego, and everything. So sometimes you can fall into a trap that you have to be in a hurry to summit. Even if it's bad weather, you try for the summit push. And we had a whole golden generation of climbers in Poland, like Kukuczka, Rutkiewicz, etc. And I think probably they were climbing in a very risky conditions comparing to how we climb today. Also having in consideration the equipment they had, etc. That's how and why most of them died trying to make some difficult routes or on some difficult climbs. But I think nowadays people climb on a safer way. We have better weather conditions. But what changed is that a lot of people have individual sponsors. They hurry because they have multiple projects. They want to climb Broad Peak, then hurry up to K2. I met Waldemar a month ago in Alaska while he was descending from Denali, which is like the highest mountain in North America. So basically what I would say, what we see in the mountains is like people try to go like on speed records, which is still nice, but sometimes you forget because you don't have time for some security, for some reasonable thinking. And there is this term which is called summit fever, which is like people when they see the summit nearby, usually it's in a higher altitude, they stop thinking. They just see the summit. They don't think about the conditions. They don't think about the families that wait at home. And I'm not saying that's the case of Waldemar, but I think it's a general issue that is happening, that was always happening in the mountains. But nowadays, since there is a lot of pressure, social media, etc., you really have to stand like firmly on earth, not to forget about like living on the sea level, about your family, about your duties, and not just think about the mountain and the peak that in itself it's very important, but you have to come back.
Yeah, being at a high altitude is really hard to stay grounded. Now you mentioned a lot of golden age climber like Jerzy Kukuczka and as well as Wanda Rutkiewicz, who actually has a very good documentary in one of the famous streaming platforms that broke a lot of records. But like you mentioned as well, a lot of these climbers who were amazing at their time ultimately met their fate on the mountains as well. Well, I believe Rutkiewicz actually disappeared, and people are still trying to figure out what happened. So it goes back to like the summit fever that you mentioned, the kind of drive. Do you think it's personal ambition is the drive to conquer something that feels like beyond yourself that are driving so many people to go to the mountain on a yearly basis?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of things that come together. One of them is like, mountaineering is not a sport, it's like an exploration. What these climbers like Wanda Rutkiewicz did in their ages, like climbing as a first European woman Everest, climbing first woman ever on K2, I think she knew what she was doing, but you can see this in the documentary as well. At some point, I don't know if she was obsessed, but for sure, like mountains were her life. She never wanted to make a family, to be at a normal life, let's say at home. She wanted to sacrifice all her life for the mountains. And of course, it's a beautiful thing. But I think if you sacrifice yourself for the mountains, there is no good ending for the story, because what they say is like a good mountaineer is the one that is alive. And I think if you want to achieve big things, you have to face the risk of death. Of course, you are not searching for death. What you search in the mountains like freedom, like this conquering, this solitude. I climbed without supplementary oxygen. I climbed Kanchenjunga last year, the mountain on which Wanda Rutkiewicz disappeared. And it took me 45 hours to go from Camp 3 to the summit and back. On the way back, I spent like 25 hours, all of it without like drinking anything, without food. I had a bivouac at 7-6. So when I survived this, I didn't feel I'm stronger, I'm invincible or something. I just thought I just touched like the red line, and behind that line, you just die. And I don't want to be back there. I never felt like I'm invincible or something. I just felt I'm a human being, I'm a strong human being, but I touched the limits. I don't want to go back to this situation. So I think personally what I can say is like I took my lesson. I know how I can climb in the future. I know I want to still do like big things and solo climbs in Himalayas. But I know if I go closer to that line, I have to come back. And I think every climber is a very individual, very strong person. But sometimes if you see the mountains and as the only solution in your life, sometimes it becomes a drug. And it's really hard to live without a drug once it becomes an obsession.
It's very interesting. This is like a very inspirational, but also put things into perspective in the same time. Very curious about your personal journey as well into this mountaineering. We do know that you started quite late into your career. And yeah, it's something about the mountains that really kind of makes it feel like something bigger than yourself, and you being kind of a speck in this whole kind of vast environment. Can you help us understand a little bit about your mindset going through it?
There is a nice sentence I heard once from an American climber, Colin O'Brien. He said, like, in the mountains, you feel very strong, but also fragile at the same moment, because you are a very strong person to enter the death zone, especially without supplementary oxygen. But then you look at the mountain, like Broad Peak or K2 or any big mountain, and you're like, I'm so small. But still, it's like in the human nature, you know, to conquer, to overpass the limits. So back to my story. I was born as a kid with asthma, so I couldn't do any sports. But I always had this, you know, thing that I wanted to overpass challenges. When I was going with the scouts to the mountains, I was the first opening trail in the snow. But then I became a journalist, so I thought, okay, sports will be just a hobby. And in 2018, there was this national K2 winter expedition, and as a journalist, reporter, you always search for the stories, and you want to tell them from the front line, from the first line. That's how I went to K2 in Pakistan. That's the first time I saw Broad Peak. And it just started like a year later. I quit my job as a reporter and I started climbing. And fun fact, today is like 4th anniversary of my summit push on Broad Peak. So on 16th of July, I tried to go up, 17 again, and on 18th of July, I summit Broad Peak, which was my first mountain. That's why also I feel like special talking about these events today. But I think I have what it takes to look at the mountains with passion, with love, but with a reasonable thinking that I still have my like things at home and I want to come back. Like life is here, not in the mountains.
Right. And last but not least, do you think that there's currently like an over-tourism in the mountains? And if you were to give any advice for amateur climber or people who want to experience perhaps a portion of it, what would you tell them?
Well, I never criticize any kind of like people climbing in the mountains, even if they go with oxygen or any kind of support, etc., because you have to be ready for the mountains on your scale. But what I think is like there are a lot of people inexperienced in the mountains. We have to consider that if you are inexperienced, you are a threat not just for yourself, but also for the people that are around you or will try to help you. You have to take this into consideration. And another major fact is that the weather and the climate changes provokes like a lot of things that we cannot predict. Like right now in Pakistan, it's a very hot summer, so we don't have a layer of ice or snow like we usually have on the rocks. So some mountains that until now were quite easy, like maybe not easy, but not that difficult, like Nanga Parbat or Broad Peak, may be a major threat. So I would say mountains are for everyone, but once you go there, be prepared because it's gonna like take you there and you will want to continue.
Right. It is in human nature to want to conquer, but at the same time, do exercise caution. Thank you so much for your input and insight. Really appreciate it. Cheers. And thank you for tuning into this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.